I'm Rabbi Pesach Willicke, and with me is Ruth Guggenheim, Director of Interfaith Relations for World Emunah. Ruth, how are you today?
Doing great, Pesach, thank you.
So Ruth, tell our audience about Emunah, what Emunah is. A lot of our audience has never heard of Emunah. The Christian world is not so familiar with this organization. So tell us about Emunah, what you do, and specifically what you've been doing since October 7th.
So, Emunah, which means faith, was started over 85 years ago by a group of religious Jewish women who started bringing the children from kinder transports to Israel, the modern-day Israel, okay? But in the late 1930s and early 40s, Emunah started some of the first shelters in Israel specifically for these children.
So kinder transports, just in case anyone's not familiar with that term.
So the kinder transports were in Europe, some of the countries that were able to get children out of Europe to England and other countries specifically to save them from being captured by the Nazis. Unfortunately, many of these children, basically all of them, never saw their parents again. So the group of Anglo-Jewish women that started Emunah wanted to assure that some of these children would be given homes in the new Holy Land in Israel, in the new land of Israel. So we started shelters there. And from those shelters, it continued to grow into residential care facilities. We no longer had the children temporarily. We had them permanently. They were our kids. Emunah raised them, sent them to school. So we started schools. We opened up the very first female college, all-female college in Israel in the 50s. And we continued to expand to provide such things as subsidized childcare, which was critical because if you're a young woman or a father and you have children and you need to either go to work or continue your education or vocational training to support your families, you needed to be assured that your children, your infant children, had a place to go. So many people may not realize this, but the government in Israel supports child care from 3 years old to 6 years old till you enter elementary school. But for infants from 3 months to 3 years, parents have to pay completely out of pocket. So Emunah started subsidized daycare centers, and we have over 120. There's one of the largest network of childcare centers throughout the country. So we have done those type of things. We are there serving the people of Israel, and we have been for 85 years, as I mentioned. And one of the most important things also is we deal with the geriatric people. We deal with the elderly, and a lot of them are still the Holocaust survivors. We provide meals. We provide Shabbos experiences. We have children from our residential homes who themselves are orphans or abused or abandoned and living with us. They prepare meals and they go to the Holocaust survivors' homes for Shabbat. Wow. Or for a holiday. They may bring them a cake or a challah, a bread or something. And it's a beautiful thing because it's multi-generational. You're having kids that might be 12 years old, 13 years old who live in an Emunah home going to visit a Savta or Saba down the street, a grandmother, an adopted grandmother or grandparent. And that's a part of some of the programs we do. It's not just about these children receiving, it's about them learning to give back, as we know. So they were taking their faith, their Emunah, and turning it into action. And that's a part of the message that Emunah wants to make sure continues amongst our people in Israel. And you mentioned, October 7th, obviously that was a game changer for every one of us. And we actually have a home, one of our residential homes for young boys who have been abused and abandoned and also have shown early on mental health issues in Neve Landi, which is in Evan Shmuel. Evan Shmuel is literally a few minutes from Sderot. So
down south,
exactly.
Near Gaza.
Thank you, yes. And they were locked into their safety rooms for days and days, and two of their counselors, two of their directors were called up immediately to the military. And in some of our homes, some of the staff did not make it back. And think of the trauma for these children. These are already children that have been abused or abandoned or orphaned. They suffer trauma and grief, and they have since they were younger. And here, now their new, quote, adopted parents, their new support system, they're suffering, they've been hurt, they've been killed. So Emunah, the very first thing we started to do was to establish critical counseling needs. We became the first line of defense, so to speak, for the civilians, for the people who lost loved ones, so that your emotional and mental trauma and grief could be dealt with through professional counseling. We have a team of over 100 professional therapists that really focus on trauma and grief, and they're all over the country. So whether it's in our residential homes or the Sderot Crisis Counseling Center, they're there serving the people. One of the other things that was really important, Pesach, with this is, as many people may be aware, there are nearly 250,000 displaced citizens right after October 7th. They literally had to move to Yerushalayim and other center cities,
Explain that a little bit more. Explain to our audience why there are so many displaced persons in Israel. What exactly do you mean?
So the displaced citizens, residents, are those that lived in what's called the southern pocket. So people that live on the southern border near Gaza, not far from it. And when the war started, these people literally had to run for their lives. They had to be displaced, whether it was because the government told them to immediately leave or because they were living in the kibbutzim or the moshavim, the areas that were literally attacked and burned and destroyed. These were families in panic and people who needed to be saved and given immediate shelter. So many people literally had to come into the center of Israel, mostly in Yerushalayim, a lot of them where I live, and all the hotels were taken over by displaced families. Can you imagine being a parent and you have 3 or 4 kids and you're living in one room, one hotel room, not for one night or 2 nights, but for 3 to 4 months? Now many of them are going back home, thank God. But during the initial couple of months when there was confusion, there's depression, there's anxiety, you have these families trying to deal with their children, their own anxiety, their own children. They're stuck in a hotel room and all that. They didn't know what to do. Emunah brought our therapists there on site to see the people. So whether it was through Zoom, whether it was through the phones, whether it was one-on-one, counseling is taking place. And the unfortunate thing, Pesach, is that we only are starting to see the beginning of the trauma that's setting in. All of us from Israel, we were in a survival mode in the beginning. That alone gives you adrenaline. You just go. You need to go because you're surviving.
You have focus.
Yeah. Now, as God willing, when the war will end and military, we all have family. We all have loved ones that are in the army. That anxiety is going to start really settling into true depression. And trauma and post-traumatic stress syndrome will start showing itself. So Emunah wants to make sure that we are well-placed out there serving the public at large so that they can heal and move forward with their lives.
Wow. And so you're the director of interfaith relations. And so that means that you're not involved in the hands-on work that you were just describing. You're involved in something that's more outward focused. Could you describe what you do as the director of interfaith relations for this wonderful organization?
Sure, thank you. So, when Emunah was approached about 5, 6, 7 years ago, they started to be approached by evangelical Christians coming to visit the land and wanting to be shown the people and have some hands-on experience. So independently, different groups started to contact various of our residential homes or our schools and saying, we'd love to come, we'd love to see them. And Emunah really didn't know how to respond. As you know, the Jewish community has our own fear factor, and there's concern like, is there a secret agenda here or something?
What do they want?
Exactly. Yeah. And because Emunah was built by women from a little older than myself even. Many of the original board members are in their 80s. So they remember things very clearly about what's gone on when they were younger and how many times certain Christian groups try to always witness and proselytize. And they're saying, is there a secret agenda here, or do they really sincerely want to come in and be a part of the Emunah family and the people of Israel? So my past experience, I always worked for Federation, and I work for a few very distinct Jewish organizations that work with Christians, and I have a background in interfaith dialogue. So it was like my boss then said, Ruthie, don't you know something about how to deal with Christians? And I said yes, and so we looked at guidelines. We did a lot of discussion. We did a lot of presentations to why this could work. And then we sat down with some of our Christian partners and friends and said, let's work on this together. We want to build partnerships and bridges, and we can make this happen. We can have mutual respect for each other, yet go forward because we're all doing God's work.
That's beautiful. So Ruth, where could people who are watching this, where could they find out more information about Emunah? Maybe they want to contribute. Give us some coordinates that people could follow your work and also play a role if they choose to.
Thank you. So in America, there actually is Emunah of America, but I would say because all of our branches around the world raise funds specifically for the projects in Israel. We only serve people in Israel, our 160 projects and 10,000 people that we do serve. The best way is emunahisrael.org. So Emunah is EMUNAH, Israel.org is our website. And on that website, you can learn much more about our programs in Israel. And if you choose to donate, you can. We also have a Facebook page called Emunah Angels of Israel.
And you yourself live in Jerusalem.
Correct.
And so, like everyone else in Israel, you've been affected by what's going on there. Can you just share your own personal reflections about October 7th and maybe how people around you have been affected more, in a personal way?
So, Pesach, because I only made Aliyah, I immigrated 7 years ago. I don't have the same history that many people that have been there 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I have an aunt that came from the Holocaust. Instead of wanting to live in America in 1948, she went to Israel. And she's been through everything in Israel since 1948. And even she has shared how distinct this war was, because as many of us know, the previous wars have been very short. We saw immediate victory, or we had to work out a ceasefire or something very quickly. This is, as we would say, schlepping on. This is just going on. And I think that's impacting all of us. And since I don't have that 7-year history, and none of my kids have been in the Army, but I have friends that all have children in the Army, and unfortunately quite a few friends that have lost grandchildren even in the military. So we're all impacted, and but you know what? Hashem, God will provide, and He will see us through this.
Amen. Ruth Guggenheim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Pesach.